want to thank you for coming this evening to share in the dialogue that we have that's been going on for the last few months, if you will, with regard to the city levy, and being able to include you with respect to how we're going to make Chillicothe better, how we're going to make our streets better, how we're going to make our streets safer, and in being able to move, again, Chillicothe forward. I want to again say thank you. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Alicia Gray, and I do sit on City Council, and I'm the representative for Third Ward. And for those of you who know, I guess I'm Beverly John. Moving forward, the agenda for this evening will go as follows. We're going to define the problem very quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to our panel that we have here. And again, this is a dialogue, it's a conversation. We're going to talk about defining the problem, the fact that we all know what it is. We know that our streets are not sound. We know that they're not safe with regard to paving. That's it. Everyone talks about the lady came in and said the damage that she had to her car. And we want to be able to move forward and be able to get our streets paved. But we also want to make sure that they're safe with regard to our safety forces, our first responders. And so we have here tonight, we have Ryan Wade with the fire department, we have Mr. Tribby with the service department, with the building department. Engineer, I'm sorry, I'll get it right. We have Jeff Creek with the fire department, we have acting chief Keith Washburn, and of course our illustrious mayor, who will be here to not only provide information and background with this conversation, but also to answer questions, to be able to, again, foster that conversation that we can have this evening about what's going on with moving forward and understanding what it means for the city levy. The situation, past and present, the city of Chillicothe income tax levy history. I'm not going to bore you with the statistics. You already know what the history is with regard to the increases over time. And you can see on the side and in the front what the history has been for the tax levy. Again, past and present, where we've come, where we are. 2014, 0.4 safety services and road repairs, 2% for proposed levy. Is there anyone here who's not understanding or maybe a little bit befuddled with regard to what that means? Hopefully we'll be able to dispel some of that confusion for you. The city of Chillicothe income tax levy breakdown, 0.1% to Parks and Rec, 0.1% to transit, 0.4% to safety services, and 1.1% to the general fund. General fund dollars also support the other designated funds as needed, including safety services, in order to maintain current staffing and service levels for the city fire and police. And again, this is all information that all of you know about. It's just being able to present the situation. Chillicothe Fire Department, with regard to the comparison from that was then, this is now 1985 to 2012. Cost and benefits. A 0.4 income tax levy increase will bring us closer to the average tax rates of similarly sized cities as well as cities with which we compete. You know, who's like us across Ohio? And what are they doing? How are they doing? Are they surviving? We know that we're not. How are they handling it? Solon, Ohio, they have a 2%. Maple Heights, 2.5. Avon Lake, 1.5. So on and so forth. I don't want to again bore you with statistics. Chillicothe is proposing a 2 point. The average is 1.875. So we're right in there. Some of them are going more, depending upon their needs. Our economic competition. We have Bexley, we have Bryce, we have Canal Winchester, Circleville, Columbus, Grandview Heights, all the way up to Worthington. The average is 2.089. So we're right in there. It's not anything that we're trying to ask capriciously. We're not going above and trying to live above the means with regard to what we're asking for, but we're asking for what we think is right. A 4% income tax levy increase will mean an extra cost of $140 a year for a person who's earning $35,000 of income. The breakdown with regard to pensions and retirement distributions are excluded from city income tax. And I know it has been a major concern of our senior citizens. They're not included. The city levy will cost the average resident roughly, with a $35,000 income, of about $2.69 per week. That's $140 per year. Dealing with property values have been on a steady decline, we know that, and with our streets in the condition that they are, that's only going to continue. 22 years without an increase in the city income tax means that we have an opportunity to invest in the continued prosperity for this city. 22 years. Some of us have children and grandchildren that age. So being able to look at what we've done and where we are and where we need to go. Chillicothe can only be a competitive location for new businesses and residential relocations if we have good streets and safe streets. And the future is bright if we can continue our current level of safety service staffing. And again, the gentlemen here are going to speak to that, and also maintain our roadways. Overview of the issues. Mayor John Huberson is going to come to us now and speak to some specifics with regard to the overview of where we are on the issues. Then we're going to follow along the agenda with regard to the gentlemen who are here, who are the experts in the area, as a panel discussion. They're going to give some information, but we want to encourage you at the appropriate time to be able to ask questions and give your piece of your mind, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for everyone for coming out tonight on probably the last summer night of the year. In an overview of what we're looking at with this tax levy increase, and nobody likes to talk about that, especially on the heels of property tax increases for school levy and just general property taxes as they are right now. The necessity of this is important, and I think it's important to review also how that breaks down. The tax structure is divided into basically three sections. Sales tax, which gets paid into the county. The city receives no benefit from sales taxes of items sold in Chillicothe and their businesses. Property tax mainly goes to the county government, and where it's sectioned off for school levy, it goes for that. So the city gets some property tax, but it's a very small amount in comparison to what the county gets or what the school systems get. Income taxes are bread and butter. That's what we survive on in the general fund. We have enterprise funds in the water and sewer, and they pretty much hold their own. Transit is another source of income that's ODOT funded and pretty much holds its own. So the rest of the services, the police, the fire, the service department, parks and rec, administrative offices, engineering, those are all paid out of the general fund, and that's what we're talking about now. So let's take a look at that. Alicia went through briefly the breakdown of our history of income tax in Chillicothe, no tax increases since 1992. It's 22 years without a raise for the city. So with that, and it's broken down the last 3 times it was enacted into specific accounts. And that's what we're talking about here. We're not lumping it into the general fund where we can spend it on whatever we want. These are going to be monies that are designated in purpose, and we'll explain those purposes. Now, Alicia went through the comparison of other cities, and these are the people that may not be close in proximity to us geographically, but they are who we compete with for any new businesses that want to enter into the city. So these are the people and their tax rates, and as Alicia explains, what we want to propose is get us up on the lower level of the playing field to where we have income that we can maintain the city and attract these kinds of businesses. We've done some work on, well, we're faced with the challenge of declining income. And I'd like to defer to Auditor Feeney to explain what we've lost in the form of income.
Mike. So there's been a lot of talk about local government funds and other declines. Essentially what's happened is the state, for a long time, gave back a portion of the state taxes, income tax that we pay back to the city. And over the past 4 years, the amount that comes back to the city, all cities, not just Chillicothe, has steadily declined. So that portion, just the local government fund portion, is about $500,000. Doesn't sound like a lot in the overall budget of the city, which is about $40 million, but again, it only hits that general fund portion. That alone wouldn't be so bad, but it was coupled with the loss of tangible personal property tax, as well as the estate tax. And what we've experienced is sort of a heaped on effect. Those are the things that have happened outside of our control. But unfortunately, the past couple weeks have sort of been a good example of what's happened in Chillicothe over 20-some years. When you look at community market closing, when you look at layoffs at Horizon, layoffs at YSK, and then the school closing, the demographic makeup of the city, when you compare it to now and 22 years ago, is much different. The population has changed, the working population has changed, and the type of jobs that Chillicothe have changed. If we had retained, say, Mead Research and a lot of these middle to upper class paying jobs, the 1.6% rate that we charge currently would have a much different effect now. But over time, our population has decreased probably 2,000 to 3,000 cents the last time there was an income tax increase. And the types of jobs have left as well that pay better. And a portion of that population has aged out of paying income tax. So you couple that with a downturn in the economy and then recent sort of takebacks from the state, and you end up with a number that really is pretty drastic over a 4-year period. So I think one of the things that's important to remember about this levy and the way that it's proposed, which as far as I know is the first time something like this has been proposed for the city, is that there's a window on it. If passed, it only lasts 10 years. So if you're thinking that the economy comes back, or if you're thinking that you're not sold on what the money's used for, it's a 10-year window, much like an Adam levy or something else that expires, and you would have the chance to renew, or the economy turns around, we get better jobs here, and it picks up on its own and it becomes obvious that it's not necessary. But I think that's an important part of this levy to remember. One of the other questions, comments, however you want to put it, that I get a lot is how do we know that this is going to go specifically for what you say it is? And so in this case it would be safety forces and street construction. And the best way I can answer that question is to give you an example. Some of you might have heard this already, but it's no secret that the city's finances are not in great shape. And if you've been through the park recently, it's no secret that we've just installed some new playground equipment, really nice and expensive playground equipment. If we could have used that Parks and Rec money for something else, I can promise you we would have. But because that portion of the income tax must go to the Parks and Rec, and capital specifically, we bought playground equipment. Now, it was needed and it's good for the community, but we have needs elsewhere. And it's a perfect example of, because the ordinance says you must spend on Parks and Rec capital equipment, we bought playground equipment. So you might drive through, and if you didn't know that, you'd say, well, why are they buying playground equipment instead of patching potholes? Well, that's why. So the same, or in reverse, applies to this question of how do we know you're going to use it for paving streets? Well, we have to. That's exactly how the ordinance was drafted. Council spent a lot of time making sure that that was the only use for that money. So, to support an extra $1.4 million in paving every year, you might need another engineer. You might need more support in the engineering department. That money, however, this income tax increase will not be used to pay for those people. And that's just the nature of how the ordinance was written. Same for the safety levy money. That money only goes to safety. But keep in mind, the safety forces right now cost the city approximately $11 million. The current safety levy tax only brings in $2.8 million. There's an obvious deficit there that what we're trying to do with this safety levy money is add some security so we don't have to go year in and year out hiring, firing, attrition, and this influx of safety forces. It's really, it's hard for the department, it's hard for the city, and it's just not good for the city. So we're looking for some stability here.
In any business or any household, when you have a loss of income, you make adjustments. And the city's done this as well. In the city budget, there's two areas. There's manpower, which includes payroll and benefits, and there is operating costs in the budget. So with regard to manpower, we've made some significant reductions in the personnel since 2010. And this goes back to the Sulzer administration. They made some cuts there. We've continued those cuts, but primarily through attrition. And it's a total of 35 people, full-time people, that are no longer working that were working in 2010. And that represents $2.1 million in payroll, salaries, and benefits. There's also an additional 86 people that were part-time in the city employment that are no longer working in the city, and that represents another $715,000 a year that we're not spending now to try and compensate for this revenue loss. The other part of that is the operating costs. We've gone through department by department in these last 3 years of budget development and trimmed costs as much as we can. Let's face it, austerity hurts. Anytime you cut money going into keeping a department, whether it's the water department, whether it's the service department, the engineering department, something's got to give. There's no magic wand without money. So when we go through the departmental budget citywide, including all the departments, all 11 departments, and 23 separate budgets that make that up, the reduction of that is $811,000 that we've trimmed off in the last 4 years. If you look at transit department, which we've had investment in because we picked up 2 new carriers with that Roscoe program and the MRDD program, which were both county run and now they're city run. We had to invest back into that, but we have revenue generation there that offsets that. If you take transit out of the equation, the reduction in operating costs is $1.1 million. That's knocking on the door of $4 million that we have reduced since 2010 in manpower and in operating costs. So like we've been saying, how will these funds be used? Streets is a good question. Everybody drives them every day. They go through the potholes. We get calls on that. The resurfacing projects are expensive. The value of asphalt is hinged upon the oil prices, which are pretty good right now. But with the turmoil in the Middle East, there's no promise that that'll remain. So to illustrate our plan for the city streets, I'd like to call upon Jim Tribby, who's standing in for Tom Day, who right now is applying for a grant with ODOT.
Well, first of all, I'd like to just start by just giving you an overview of how we decide what streets get paved, how we go about it. We have a rating system that we use based off of ODOT's rating system, but there's certain areas of it that ODOT doesn't have to deal with that we do. Handicap ramps, manholes, water valves, stuff like that go into the cost of repairing a street. So basically our rating system, we go through and we rate every street every 4 years. We drive every street, we look at it, and I think there's about 10 different items that we look at on a street. And there's 2 of us that do it, and when we drive that street, we get the end of it, we compare notes. So it's not just one person saying this street's really bad or this facet of the street is bad versus the other. We both look at it and we sit down and we go through that list of deficiency in the street, whether it's rutting, which is due to just wheel travel, hot tires in the summer. You'll notice the streets will rut somewhat, where the wheel traffic is. Polished aggregate is another one that we look at, and that has to do with the skiddability of the street. You get a polished aggregate, you go to put on your brakes. If it's raining, you'll slide. So there's potholes, alligatoring pavement. There's several things that we look at. So once we get through all the streets and we compile all this information, that gives us a rating, the worst streets to the best streets. That's what we pull off of. You'll see here that we've got several maps up that we've kind of put together. Really, the 2015 is pretty much set in stone. We've gathered all that information. The other cost that's involved in that, like I say, manholes. A manhole, to have that manhole raised or lowered, depending on what we're doing to the street, is about $350 a manhole to do. So in town, we have a lot of manholes. Water valves are $125 to raise or lower if we have to do work on those. Handicap ramps. We're mandated. We have to put handicap ramps in. ADA requires that. So anytime we pave a street, along that street, every place there's an alley, every place there's a street, we have to put handicap ramps in. They'll run anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 a piece to put those in. So basically, since 2000 that I've been taking care of paving when we've had money, paving the streets, about 1/3 of my budget goes towards handicap ramps. It always works out that way. It's about 1/3. So looking at the 15 list of streets that we have right here that we're looking at doing, those we factored in everything, what we're doing to the street, whether we're edge milling the street or full milling the street. There's no magic number out there that we can say that per square foot or per square yard that street's going to cost, because we look at everything. There's deficient drainage. That's another thing we look at. If a street is flat, it's going to hold water. So if that's the case, then we'll come in and we'll edge mill it, which doesn't cost as much as milling the whole street. If we've got excessive crown, then we'll mill that off because you don't want that. Snowy weather, stuff like that, vehicles can slide off if you get it too steep. So all these things affect that. Also, paint. We do not have a paint and sign shop anymore that goes out and paints all the long lines, the stop bars, the crosswalks, the arrows, the school crossing zones, stuff like that we have to maintain. If you notice driving around, you just don't see much of the paint anymore. That's a problem. It's a problem for law enforcement, So we've factored all that into these streets on 2014. We've went out and we've measured every long line of paint, every stop bar, every crosswalk, every facet of that street. So we're pretty confident with the 2015 that's pretty much good. The only thing we have to do is, if this passes, then we'll go through and check our numbers. We'll put that out to bid. 16 and on, we show some streets, but frankly, we don't have the real good information because before the mayor came in, we went out and did the rating. So we're due this winter to do the rating again. And you know how the winter went last year with all the freezing and thawing. Streets fell apart. So our rating system, we're at the tail end of that. So we're ready for a re-rate. And like I say, you can look at those and go, well, my street's not on there, and it should be. Yeah, it might need to be. We may move streets up according to what we find out when we rate them this winter. So that's basically, I don't know if you got any questions about how we do it, or. Yes, sir.
You said you have a plan for 2015.
Yes.
So that's pretty well set in stone.
It's pretty much set. It could vary a little bit, and it really depends on pricing too. We put a lot of this stuff together when we're, like Tom is my boss, the engineer, he's turning stuff in for issue 2 for next year through the state. Well, we apply for that money now for next year. So it's kind of a gamble with what's the pricing going to be on the work we project to do here on out. I'm hoping that if we have the money, that we can hire some stuff, depending on long line painting and stuff like that, and maintenance is what we're looking at, that we can spend dollars wisely and get that money out, maybe not have to pay prevailing wage if we put it out for spending our own money. Like if we just hire out the painting, depending on that threshold of dollars, we may not have to pay prevailing wage. We'll get a lot more work done for that. So, yeah, I think we've pretty much got that set. It may vary a little bit depending on pricing and stuff when it comes in. We use ODOT pricing. ODOT puts out a summary of all the work that they do last year. So this winter, we'll have a new price guide come out from ODOT, and it'll say what the average bid was per line item of materials and stuff, and what they actually paid. And that's what we base our numbers on. So we're basing numbers out here, pricing, based on last year's numbers.
On these maps, we illustrate the streets in green here that have been paved over the last 10 years. This is 2004 through 2014. Majorities of main state thoroughfares that have been ODOT paved. So it was back in 2008 where the city borrowed $1 million to do some of their own paving. Brewer Heights got paved during that time. West 5th Street, I remember some of that. In the 2015, 2016, 2017 plans, which are up here, respectively, in red, the streets that are we have targeted are the ones that we have mapped out. And what we're doing with that to take on some of this variability and pricing that may come up is I've told the engineering department to use a 800,000 out of the $1.4 million that this levy would provide, and the rest would be contingency to do more. So what we're trying to do is we predict at like a 60% level, 65% level of what the funding availability is, so that we can underpromise, overproduce. If the prices go up, we can absorb that comfortably. If they don't go up, or we have more than we can do, we'll add more streets onto that paving plan. So this is to be safe, because it's like Jim said, it's tough to go out 3 years and say this is the plan and this is what we're going to do, because we don't know what the winter's going to affect on certain streets. We get particularly heavy thawing and freezing, where it breaks up the concrete worse than another street. We might change some of that priority in. But under budgeting with the available money will allow us to try and keep to that plan, so people can have a sense of certainty that their streets, if it's on the map, is going to get done, and we won't fail in that regard. So we're trying to be conservative as we can be with the financing of this, so that we deliver what we say we're going to do. And then the last map over there represents the 3 years of cumulative paving proposal that we have out in place. Okay, safety. 2/10 of the proposed levy go for safety forces. Now, why do we need to do that? The world's a different place than it was in 2010. It's certainly in a different place than it was in 1984, 1985, when we were probably at the high water mark of our officers on the street and our firefighters on the street. What we need to do is part of the $2.3 million that Luke was discussing that came off, and that's not income tax reduction, that's funding that's been reduced outside of income tax through state grants and things like that. 2 of those grants that's been reduced, one is the COPS grant that we got in the late 2000s, and that supplied funding to pay the wages of 2 police officers. We also got a SAFER grant about the same time, and that funded 5 firefighters. So we had that grant money helping us through the times to bring our safety forces back up to where they should be. And those funds ran out. The COPS grant and the SAFER grant both went towards the big cities that are having problems with crime and arson, and they're not available to the city anymore. The COPS grant expired in August of 2013, and the SAFER grant expired in October of 2013. So we've been running basically all of 2014 trying to maintain the same amount of staffing without the help of those funds. But the proposal is for this 0.2% is to go back and refund those positions, so that we don't hold our officers and our firefighters hostage every time the city gets in a money crunch. Safe streets are important. They're a thing that I've committed to. As long as I'm mayor, I'm committing that we will have safety forces that will keep our streets safe. And when you look at the history of crime in Chillicothe, you could talk about the drug issues, you could talk about the prostitution, but you're not talking about the murders, and you're not talking about the violent crimes. Not too much in the city. Our guys do a heck of a job in that regard. We don't have many arsons. We save people on the way to the hospitals. I couldn't be prouder of our safety forces. They do a heck of a job at reduced amount of funding. We had some ugly meetings this week about overtime. Things we have to do with the money that we have available. We're not going to overspend our budget. So talk about fire a little bit. I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Creed.
You saw in the presentation that they talked about the fact that our run volume, since we passed the last safety levy, has gone up more than twice what it was, from 2,500 to almost about 6,000 runs a year. At the same time level, our staffing levels dropped by about 25%, and we've also gone from 3 EMS units down to 2. Although that sounds pretty gloomy, what we've learned to do, we've learned to be more efficient with the people that we have. We're doing as much as we can with what we do have available. During that same time period, while we've seen our personnel cut and the number of units that we run cut, we've done a lot of other positive things. Okay, back in the late 80s, Chief Carnes got us to be a Class 3 fire department for our insurance rating. That puts us in the top 5% in the country. We've been able to maintain that through the last 30 years. Okay, so we've kept that insurance rating. What does that mean? It means we're more attractive to businesses to come to our community because we're cheaper, because their insurance rates are cheaper. So we've done that positive thing. The other positive thing that we've done is we've created our paramedic program. Over 50% of our department is now paramedics, which means when you're having a heart attack or a serious injury or illness, they can do a lot more for you and stabilize you before we get you to the hospital. It increases your chances of survival or allows you to have a better outcome. So we've done those positive things even during this time period. The other thing that we've done too is we've stepped up and we now have a hazmat response team for our city, which also helps to cover our county. Okay, over half of my personnel now are hazmat techs, which is the highest level that they can reach, and they're able to respond and contain hazmat incidents, which is the railroads going through here with stuff on them that may not be the good stuff we want to have in our city. We're able to respond to that and take care of those problems, contain those kind of problems. So even during this time period, we've done a lot of positive things. We've also stepped up our fire inspection and fire prevention program within the fire department to make sure that our businesses and our community are safe for our residents and the people that come to our community to shop and do those kind of things. So we're trying to attract those businesses into our area. We're trying to be part of that solution to make this a better community. So what does this levy do for us? It helps to stabilize the fire department. It frees up that decision that we've had to make the last 3 or 4 years. Do we spend money on personnel or do we spend money on equipment? The equipment that we have is aging, and our maintenance dollars are going up higher and higher and higher each year. This frees up that capital money to where we don't have to make that hard decision every year now, to where we can replace that equipment, and I'm not wasting money out of the general fund to maintain that equipment. Those costs keep going up. We're up about $20,000, $30,000 more a year than what we were 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, so it allows us to stabilize some of that, make sure that the equipment that we have out there responding to your emergencies is good equipment that's not 13 years old as how old one of our squads are. Okay, so it allows us to start moving forward with that. And long term, you know, I'm looking at ways that we can improve this department. As our population ages and we need to get more squads back on the road, we've done a lot of good things with our EMS billing, with collecting the data better than what we have in the past to try to bring that revenue up per call that we're getting back, so that hopefully as that keeps going up, the cost of bringing more people in to maybe staff that squad during the peak hours or maybe staff a third squad long term becomes a more viable option for us. And those are the positive things that we can do into the future. But we have to be able to afford those things. We have to maintain the business that we have and bring more businesses here to be able to do that. And if we lose our insurance rating, we lose those kind of things, I don't know that we're that city that people want to come to, but if we stabilize at this point, I think we can be that city that other people come to, and we're part of that solution to help this city grow and become what we need to be.
On the other side of that 0.2% is the police force, and I've invited Acting Chief Washburn to give his side of the story.
Okay, I don't want to get up here and talk about doom and gloom and all the negative things that happen in the city, but if you read the paper, Chillicothe is hit with crime. We're crime-ridden. Like the mayor said, we have avoided the violent crimes, but we're getting destroyed on the property crimes, the theft, robbery. I kind of got thrust into the spotlight on my birthday into this position. And when I first became an officer back in '95, I said, that's my goal. And then it changed. Then I got thrust in this position, and my wife said, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. So I started to think, what do I want this police department to look like in 5 years? And where do we want to go? And then I saw a ad that someone had on Facebook, and it had a picture of then and now. And then was cops from the 1960s at a donut shop with their hats on crooked, drinking coffee, talking to little kids. And now look like members of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, United States Army Ranger Battalion. I want to go back to the 1960s, community policing era. One of the things that I've talked about is school resource officers. We need officers in these schools. This is where the problems start. A lot of people out here don't raise their kids. They bring them to school, but we need officers in these schools. Our biggest issue right now, other than manpower and money, are cruisers. When Ford Motor Company did away with the Crown Victoria in 2011, we tried to prepare for that, and we bought Dodge Chargers. because that was the latest and greatest. And we're spending about $35,000 to $40,000 a year just in maintenance for these cruisers. So we have to get these cars fixed. And like Chief Creed said, it frees up our capital money in the budget. And when I first looked at this budget, I said I can cut this by 7 to 12%. I can do it. I can cut the city's police department's budget easy. And then I had a conversation with the mayor, and he said, you know, if this levy passes, you'll have X amount of dollars for equipment. I said, I don't want the equipment. I want the manpower. So I go through and I look at this budget, and I look at it and I look at it, and I said, man, I've lied to myself. I can't cut this budget. There's nothing there to cut. We're spending so much money on cruiser maintenance. You know, we need the new cars bad. And take, for instance, Piatt Avenue. This winter, you know, even after the streets were cleared, the potholes were horrible. You take cars that are junk now, driving across that, you know, we tore our cruisers up. Luckily, we got 4 new ones this year. I asked for 6 for next year. If we get 6 new cars next year, the Dodges are gone out of our fleet. The only thing I ask is just get prepared with the police department right now, because we're going through a big change. It's a big transitional period, and the goal of everyone in that police department right now is to improve our public image, and everyone's on board. One more thing, I have Dispatcher Matson here. He's probably our best dispatcher.
Well, you want something?
We have 3 dispatchers at the police department for 3 shifts, and we have 6 shifts per week that are uncovered. And I've done some calculations and sent to the mayor. Next year, instead of a police officer, I want 2 dispatchers, but I'll settle for 1. And that's a tremendous savings just in the overtime and the backfield to cover for those dispatchers. And you know, that's the nucleus of the police department. She talks to every victim, every witness. You know, we can't do without dispatchers. Lancaster has 12 dispatchers, and they're just a little bit bigger than us.
Yeah, I think that the safety forces, with regard to the streets, what I want to do is have a transparent progress report by street as we do them, to show what the calculated costs are and what we ended up paying on those. We are not going to add the city staff to do the paving. We're going to outsource each item of that, and we're going to outsource whatever engineering needs to be done, whatever surveying needs done. So we're not adding to city staff. We're not going to keep somebody full-time on there for work that may or may not be full-time. We'll outsource that and utilize city businesses or area businesses to help the income flow to the city. With regard to the dispatch question is interesting right now, because we're looking at a program that can maybe get a metropolitan dispatch thing together where we keep our people but they will be hired by another firm. That would be outsourced. And we're just taking a look at that. We're doing some preliminary work. We're talking to the Ross County Sheriff's Department. Fire Department gets 6,000 calls a year. Police Department gets just less than 24,000 calls a year. And the Police Department's just a fury of activity. Right now, that's a spot in the dispatch area for somebody on light duty where we have transitional work, where we don't have to pay workers' compensation costs. We pay transitional work and keep them coming to work. That helps the employee, that helps the city. It fills position. But when you look at the big picture of that, it's kind of a waste of money, because you're taking officers off the street when a firefighter always has to sit in the dispatch room, or a police officer always has to sit in the dispatch room because we're understaffed in dispatch. So we have to do something that either combines the dispatch between the city, the 2 city departments, or we do something metropolitanly with the county. So we're taking a look at that to where we can have some savings on that. The improved road stands on its own. I think everybody understands that we need to make action on our streets. And to draw more businesses into the community, they look for certain things. They look for certain amenities where they want to put people that are going to be their employees and have them have a quality of life that they are going to enjoy. And a good city, a clean city, a safe city is what they're looking for when they look to move plants into a new location. So with this levy doing that, I think that we can build off the downtown. The downtown's sort of rejuvenating right now with the Carlisle building. There's businesses being bought, there's buildings being bought, there's new businesses being recruited to come into the downtown. Every successful city has a vibrant downtown, and we're rebuilding that right now to put that into place with the younger generation living downtown. That'll create more demand for businesses, restaurants, new style of living, and to add on to our tourism capabilities as a historic city. So we're coming at this from the young and the old, and making more of a draw downtown so that we get people in town that want to live here and spend money here, and that'll help our income tax situation.